Hello, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive into the upcoming X-Plane 12, the latest addition from the X-Plane team at Laminar Research. Today, I'm joined with the wonderful Alex Unruh. Do stop me if I pronounce that wrong, Alex.
Unru is the proper German pronunciation. We say Unru over here, but I get Unra and a whole bunch of other things. So Unru, it's all good to me.
Fair enough. All good stuff. And today, we are here to talk about the fantastic and new addition to X-Plane, first ever Airbus in X-Plane, which is the A330-300. So,
Yes.
why don't you kick us off with telling us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with X-Plane in the first place?
Okay. Well, my journey with X-Plane it starts. Oh goodness, it must have been around X-Plane 5. I don't even know how many years ago that was. I was in junior high or early high school, and I just wanted to play, flight simulation software on my Mac. And I had old F-18, I had old A10, you know, two, like flat rendered graphics and hard faces, no real textures of any kind. And X-Plane, I tried to demo for X-Plane 5, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I can paint things, and I can do this and that. And I tinkered for ages with building my own silly things, like you know some airplanes, but also silly things like buses and trucks, and what can you make this do? And I think that kind of just creativity sandbox spiraled into me, eventually building airliners. In my first year of college, I went to music school my first year. I didn't stay in music school. I went to art school instead, and continued X-Plane kind of, as a hobby until years of pouring into the hobby later, talked to the right people and managed to sneak in the door at Laminar. I have no idea how that happened. It just happens. And I've been there since 2014. I think the summer of 2014. Hard to believe that it's been that long already.
And was that in the run up to the release of X-Plane 11,
That
possibly?
was, yes, that was in the run up to the release of X-Plane 11, my first major project for X-Plane 11 was building up the 737.
Wow. And actually,
Yeah.
the one thing, so I took a bit of a time out with flying in sims to go to
Hmm.
university, then came back and experienced X-Plane 11. It kind of blew my mind. I just remember the kind of the trailer and the lighting system bouncing off that 737 coming into land.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
So we probably have you to thank for that. So what exactly is your role at Laminar Research then?
My role is, I would say, technical art director. I am involved in a lot of the graphic decisions, graphic tuning, getting everything looking, as we want it to in the world space. We have the programmers, and then we have the artists who go in and they tweak things and make sure that we get what we want. But I'm responsible for that. I partly responsible for aircraft development. It used to be my full-time thing, but I've gotten help from the wonderful Daniela, who has taken some of the load so that I can do more aircraft and some of the other things that I want to do as we've gotten bigger and the jobs have gotten bigger. It's that's been a blessing. But I do that. I build airplanes. I test things all the time, and try to make everything look and feel and interact as absolutely as cleanly and nicely and best as we can.
And who'd have thought all of those hours tinkering with X-Plane 5 on your Mac and
Oh my goodness, I
you
know.
spend more time tinkering than you do flying, right? And
It's
it's now got your job.
probably it's probably the reason why I didn't stay in art school, because I was tinkering with X-Plane in my dorm room instead. Was much more fun than being in a practice room for 4 hours a day. Art school was a better fit.
Yeah, I can only imagine, looking back on my time, if I'd have had, a decent flight sim setup, how much work I'd actually do at university is probably very little. So
No.
I totally get that.
I did go back, did go back to school, got my degree in graphic design and ceramics. And so I've always had an eye for the 3D, and that's, I think that's why I'm particularly fond of what I do.
Nice. And ceramics is just a different type of baking, right? So
Oh, exactly.
fantastic. So in the run up to the release of X-Plane 12, obviously we've seen a bit of a shift in terms of aircraft,
Yes.
particularly default aircraft. And with the biggest addition, I think, is the move to replicating an Airbus aircraft, which does seem rather
Yes.
peculiar, considering the current fleet is all US Boeing.
Yes.
Whose decision was it to add an Airbus into the fleet?
It was one that I remember sitting in, we have company meetings where we all get together, in various places. I think this was probably one at Austin's house. We all get together and we're like, what are we doing? Here's the roadmap. And we finally said, we have to do an Airbus. We can't let them hang any longer. I can't remember who said, but I was on board immediately, and I wanted to do the A330 because that was the one that spoke to me. I like the big airliners. We had done a bunch of narrow bodies already. I think initially I had said the 340, but I didn't want to deal with the extra two engines and all of the extra systems that would have entailed. So, it's like, pare it down a little bit, take it down a little bit. It was still a massive undertaking, an incredible amount of back-end scripting and, stuff that the sim just wasn't born to do, had to be invented to do. And, we got it done.
Amazing. And actually, it's the Airbus A330 has a real place in my heart, being the first aircraft that I remember being on, that I remember it was an Airbus A330. I'd been on one aircraft before, and it was probably a Boeing 767. But actually, that made me fall in love with aircraft. And then the first one I remember was my travel 330-200.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
my
interestingly,
first was a 720. The first that I remember was a 727.
Wow.
That is way too much steam, but it's so good.
That's
so
pretty prestige aircraft, though, right?
Oh yeah.
Pretty cool. And so, obviously, we've seen that it's a Dash 300. Who particularly made the decision? Of course, you may have influenced it, but who kind of ran with the 330-300 rather than the A380, for example?
Yeah, the decision to go with the 30-3 was, it came down to, we knew that we needed something kind of to fit into the middle. We had the long haul with the 747. We had the short haul with the narrow bodies. We wanted something that could bridge that. And the 330-300 just kind of, ticks those check marks. It's an Airbus. It's, it is a wide body, but it's not an ultra wide body. It's, good for long haul. It's good for short range. It's good for medium range. It's, kind of an all-rounder. And I don't know, I just like the look of the 300 a little bit more than the 200. So if you were going to flip a coin as to point between those two, I always like just a little bit more airplane there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? It does sit in that rather swing role, doesn't it? Because it does cross-country with Delta in the US.
Yep.
We've seen a few, in fact, during sort of lockdowns and COVID.
Yeah,
The 330 is working on the freight runs. So British Airways, Aer
absolutely.
Lingus, and Iberia
Hmm.
fly from Heathrow to Dublin on a 330. It just seems really strange, but
Yeah,
they're really
yeah.
great to see.
I've been on the Salt Lake City Atlanta 330 run once. Super nice.
Yeah, it's always nice if you've, because they're fairly empty most of the time. So sometimes you get the lie flat beds because they interchange the long hauls with the short haul aircraft. It's quite nice.
Nice.
I
Not so
like that.
lucky
So
between two Delta hubs, but yes.
nice. And so yourself have been working on the 330.
Hmm.
How big is the project team? There must be quite a few people involved.
There are. I would say I probably fall under the principal. Um, then we've got another artist who did the texturing in the cockpit, and his name is Rodrigo. Um, One of our artists did the geometry and the texturing for the cabin. That's Max. And then another one of our artists did a whole bunch of the ECAM scripting specifically for the warning system, which is just kind of exploded in, you read the documents and you're like, this can't be that hard, and then you start going through them while you're scripting or coding or doing whatever, and it just snowballs into this big massive wonderful thing that does everything that you could want it to. And just the warning system was on one person, and then I was responsible for exterior the exterior texturing. I modeled the cabin, or not the cabin, I modeled the cockpit rather, and did all of the necessary wire up and the core scripting.
Oh, so actually, for a really complex aircraft, there is only a few of you that really kind of build
There's,
out from the
yep,
ground up.
yep.
So it's a
But
lot of
this
work.
is, it is a lot of work. Work. For this, for comparison, the 737 was me, and Max built the cabin after we shipped 11.0. So I think that was like an 11.1 or 11.2 upgrade. We had the cabin, and but that was one person.
Amazing. And so, how did you've chosen the A330, you've
Hmm.
got the skills to build it in a flight sim.
Yep.
Where do you get the knowledge and the behavior of an A330 built into the sim? Did you have an airframe that you were sort of involved with? Is there a couple of pilots, an A330 pilot that you consulted?
We have. It's a complicated answer with lots of parts. You know, I start my work. I build the basic ACF file, and it's loosely tuned. I probably got things wrong because you never know. Austin had been developing the Airbus fly-by-wire system um, beforehand. We knew that we had it in the bag, so that was one of the reasons why we're like, okay, we can actually do the Airbus now. Um, so it was marrying those two things together. And then as far as actual flight dynamics, when we got to testing, we have an Airbus pilot that we work with closely. He flies the 320 in Europe somewhere. Um, and I think he does a lot of he works a lot with the airport scenery and everything else too. So he's good. Great tester for us as well. And then we found some actual 330 pilots who Austin's been corresponding with, and he goes back and forth, and they tweak the fly-by-wire system here, there, the other thing, and eventually, get everything to where it needs to be. I've been kind of
Amazing. So
hands off
actually,
from the tuning since Austin and the pilots got a hold of it, but it's been.
well, that's all right.
You know,
At least it didn't get handed
oh yeah,
back
it
to you.
is. Yeah, exactly. It comes back, and it's still flying, and it's flying better. And I have to fix some things to make it compatible with the changes or whatever they've done, and we get it going from there.
And I suppose that that's the benefit of having um, a particle model flight sim, is that actually for
Yes.
the flight model you build the 3D cockpit and it kind of looks like a 330. There's some
Uh-huh.
tweaking to do, but it flies like a 330 because of that base.
Yep, exactly. The ACF file, the planemaker base, is incredibly strong, and the work that Austin has done recently, has just made it even that much better in just about every regard. He'll come to us with something, and we all look at each other. We don't look at each other, but there's glances happening across the internet. We're like, wait, did this get changed? We have to, and then of course, like everything falls into place and things start working that never worked before, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is good. This is good.
And so I spoke to Ben Supnick in a previous episode,
Yes,
and Ben said he spends most of his time saying no to the further development because eventually you have to get X-Plane in the hands of people.
we do, absolutely. We,
So
we we can't we can't keep tinkering forever. We have to let other people do that.
exactly. So that being said, there must be a line drawn in terms of features and things you'd like
Definitely.
to include. But in terms of systems, what are the sort of
Yes.
systems that we might see in the A330 when we get our hands on it?
Okay. So the hydraulic system has been greatly expanded for 12. We get multiple pumps per engine. We have the ability to do all three loops. So you get your green, you get your blue, you get your yellow. Those hydraulic systems can drive individual flight surfaces. So your aileron can run off of green and blue, or it can run off of green and yellow. I probably got the colors wrong, but you know what I mean. We can set the left aileron to go one, we can set the right aileron to go another, and you get those systems working. Um, you have all the push buttons in the cockpit. They all hook up, connect, and do what they're supposed to do. And you turn things off, and you lose control surfaces, and this and that. Like that kind of stuff is built in today, which is great. Um, so you have hydraulics and let's see, the navigation stuff with the FMS, of course, is more sophisticated now than it has been. So there's all of that as well, and not all of it. There's more that the Airbus does, but a lot of it's there. And we basically try to just go through and hook up as many of the systems that exist. We'll tweak them on the script side, and go in and out and in and out, and basically you end up with a cockpit that's pretty much completely, just about everything's clickable. Everything does something.
Amazing. And you touched on fly-by-wire beforehand.
Yes.
So, that is the epitome of an Airbus, right?
Uh-huh.
There's certain things you
Yep.
can do, certain things it'll do on its own.
Yep.
So is that a fully functional system that when you turn the left fly-by-wire systems off, only certain things will work?
That is not integrated yet. We don't have like the primary 1, 2, and 3 computers. We don't have the secondary 1 and 2 computers, which you're going to, you've got all 5. They all drive their own little things. Now, that is potentially a scope discussion for after we get 12.0 out the door. But
So
that's definitely something that we have to draw lines in certain places, and that was one of them. Austin has given us a lot with the fly-by-wire system, but we don't have the ability to go in there and fine tune exactly what features we're going to turn on and off and on and off, depending upon what systems, what flight computers are on. But cross fingers, we might get there.
Hey, the 737 didn't come with a cabin, and now it does. So, we're forever hopeful. Fantastic. And then you also spoke about the FMGS, which is obviously completely different in an Airbus than it has been for most of the other X-plane aircraft that have come before it. So it's a very Boeing modeled system.
It is
Although
a Boeing modeled system.
It's an all-rounder FMGS system. Will that be
Uh-huh.
different in the 330 as it was in other aircraft?
It initially, I believe it is going to be it's going to be the Boeing system initially, unless there is the if. Probably not, but I would say there is a small chance that Philip finishes the work reskinning and reorganizing the data structure and the pages and everything, so that we'll get at least an Airbus flavored one at some point, probably early during the run.
Fantastic. And that's, as I'm sure you're aware, that's probably the first question, or the question that you've had the
Oh,
most about the
it
aircraft.
definitely is. Is it going to have an Airbus? No. Yes, eventually, but not yet.
Yeah,
It's
and it
being worked on.
just goes back to that, drawing the line there,
Mm-hmm.
the big changes that are coming to X-Plane 12, and we've seen lots of it being previewed.
Yeah.
I you know they are really the minute details that will hopefully come after, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Amazing. And so lots of new systems in the Airbus. Did we, or will we see those sort of refinements and those different sort of systems in other aircraft being used as well?
Yes, some of the aircraft have inherited the better systems just because they were using the X-plane systems to begin with. Certain things, like hydraulics, going back to that'll have to be set up on a per airplane basis, for the new stuff. But it's there and it's ready and it's able to be plugged in as soon as the airplane authors can get in there. And I think I did some of the updates on the 737 to include some of those things. I can't always remember exactly what I've done, when things have been, like in the can for 5 months. I'm like, did I do that? Did I not do that? Should I double check? It's going to be a surprise for me too.
And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? We talk about, we're coming to the end of this X-Plane 12.0 development, but actually it's been in the pipeline since we had, support for Vulcan and Metal, right, for
Yes.
11.55. So, how long ago was that? I can't even remember how long ago that
I
was.
can't
It's a
either.
while.
And we've been, it's internally, we don't just wake up on one morning, once 11:55 is done and we're happy with it and say, now let's talk about 12. We've been talking about it for years at this point.
Yeah. What would you say the biggest challenges have been? Recreating an Airbus within X-Plane. What's the biggest challenge that you've had?
Oh, there are still some systems that are limited. Um, and working around some of those limitations and kind of building the systems in script is always tricky. Coming up with good heuristics for how fast does the cabin warm up or how fast does the cabin cool down. You have all of those temperature needles in the ECAM display when you put the forget the name, but basically the air conditioning screen. And you get all the little needles and you have all the little vents, that open up and they manage the temperature. And you can control the dials on the overhead and say, I want the cabin to be hot, cold, warm, whatever. And depending upon all of the the things the pieces that we do have, how do you put those together to get something that looks like it's doing what you plausibly, what you would consider like plausible reactions, plausible responses, and going through all of those little things and the little details. And is this pump on? Well, no, so you have to do something else. Is this pump on? No, so you have to do something else. Are these on? Yes, they are, so you can actually do something else. And you have all of the conditions, everything, and you're just trying to get, you're just manipulating numbers and needles. It's we don't have air conditioning blowing out of our computers. You're not going to feel that the Airbus is hot or cold, but it needs to know if it's hot or cold.
Yeah, and
Little things like that. And getting into the weeds of stuff is always you know, things sound simple at first, and then you start diving just a little deeper. You turn the page again, and you're just, by the end of the document, you're like, how am I going to do this? And we do the best we can. We try to make things as efficient as we can, of course, and you know, plausibility is the end goal.
And I suppose when you're when you're looking at being an artistic director of
Hmm.
a simulator, you know the first thing that pops into my mind is you wouldn't expect someone to need a maths or physics degree, but actually it would be really helpful.
I did happen to be quite good at math in high school, so I rely on trig. I haven't had to use calculus, thank goodness, because I don't remember it. But I've had to rely on trig and all those other things. I learned scripting with the 737. That was eye opening. I have an appreciation for what my colleagues do, a sliver of of understanding. But yeah, it's like anything, it's a learning experience, even when you've been doing it for years.
Yeah, and I suppose there was a definitely a natural progression for the 737 to become what it is now and very digital,
Hmm.
but it's got humble beginnings. It's still a a
Oh
um,
yeah,
you know an analog aircraft with digital
definitely.
systems, and
Yep,
so it's quite organic the way it's grown. But with the Airbus, it was designed as a digital aircraft,
it
so
was.
how tricky was it to gauge what the aircraft would do automatically, but still have to do the calculations behind, or what would you rely on as pilot
I
input?
mean, I would say that um, oh, that's tricky because I'm not a pilot myself. I always wanted to be. Um, I've never flown an Airbus. I don't know how an Airbus flies. That's why we have flight testers who actually fly the things for their jobs, and we can get the feedback, and they can talk to Austin about the fly-by-wire system. That's not my lockbox. I look at the key and I'm like, nope, 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 not going there. Austin, that's all on you. So as far as getting the air, like that proper Airbus flight dynamic behavior, that's there's things that I can do as far as making the ACF and making sure that the wings have the more or less the correct airfoils, and they're all set up with the right control surfaces, and so many all the little details so that you get plausibly close, and then it's up to the black box to run things from there.
Amazing. And so, where do you start when designing an aircraft? Did you just kind of do it from pictures, or is it a more of a scientific mathematical approach to that? So, camber of the wings and all that kind of stuff.
So a lot of and I used to do this differently. I used to start with an ACF file, and I would, sculpt out the fuselage, and I would put the wings, and do this and that and the other thing. What I rely on, or what I do now, I start in Blender, with as many references as I can find. Three views, really good, distortion limited photography, long lenses and all of that, so that you minimize the perspective shift. And oh, I must look at thousands of images and videos, and you put things in, and you pick up bits of pieces from manuals, and put those images here, you put there, and you just kind of start building, you know, kind of one piece at a time. You start with the fuselage, then you sculpt the tank. You have to find some kind of analog for the airfoil shape before you can, and there's visual clues everywhere. How does the flap pylon seam, between the bottom of the flap pylon meet the wing? What's that shape? And you take those shapes and you can determine more or less, the profile of the wing at all these different places, and you just put it together. I mean, it's an it's a tedious process, of course, but it's also incredibly gratifying when you know you've gotten it right.
Yeah, and to start with, almost like a wireframe of something, and then to build on that, a full
Mm-hmm.
Airbus aircraft.
You start with a circle about 36 vertices or 48 vertices. I can't remember what it was, and you build the fuselage, sculpt the nose, and make sure you get the windows exactly as you need to be. Take cockpit measurements if you have access to them to make sure that the windows are not pinched in too far or expanded too far, because then you're never going to get the cockpit to fit in properly. The windows are hugely important to get right.
It's almost like drawing eyes halfway up your head if you get it wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Because then you have to deal with it if you get it wrong later. And there's so many steps in between that you don't want to get it wrong. If you do, you can fix it, but you don't really want to, depending upon how far down the rabbit hole you've gone. Have you textured the thing already and then you find out the windows are the wrong size? That's a bad day. I've been there. I don't want to be there anymore. It wasn't that way with the 330, but I've definitely been there.
Amazing. So one thing that X-Plane 12 looks like we've taken a massive step on is the sounds. So sounds of the environment, which we know,
Yes.
we've had a massive increase on. How tricky was it to get the right sounds of an Airbus? Because obviously they do sound completely different to a Boeing.
They do. Daniela, our sound engineer, I don't know what her sources are, but she has done amazing work. In general, she takes she'll find videos from the inside and from the outside, and she'll pull apart the spectrogram and look at the audio things and find out where those frequencies are. And then once she has all those frequencies mapped to N1, N2, N3 in the case of the A330, fun fact about that one, we actually synthetically generate N2 based upon where N1 and N3 are, because X-Plane only simulates 2 spools. 1 or 2 spools right now, but we have all 3 for sound and for instrumentation purposes. Everything lines up great. It does what it's supposed to do. But Danielle looks at all of those, can gauge those frequencies and runs through the whole thing, and then you go outside, in the X-Plane world, and you start the engine, you're like, this is amazing. It sounds like you're actually there.
Yeah, incredible.
She does incredible work. I don't know if you've talked with her, but she does fantastic.
We are doing another deep dive on the sound environment. Unfortunately, it won't be me, but I'm certainly definitely interested in the differences between X-Plane 11 and 12.
Oh yeah, we didn't have the ability to put sounds on objects or on, we call them actors inside Laminar. So your push tug is an actor. I think it's a Ren actor, actually. It doesn't matter. Your baggage truck has an actor. Your this and that, and all of those things now have the ability to have sound attached to them. So it's not just your airplane and the AI aircraft, which is what it was before, and that was only if you had FMOD sounds enabled. But now they're fleet-wide, and all of the ground trucks have them. We have sounds, just kind of general airport ambient sounds, and we load that land class data basically into a system, so we know, are we on a street, are we in a city, are we in rural, and we can pick sounds to generate that feel of the environment pretty much everywhere.
It's really incredible, the lengths that you really are going to really make X-Plane 12 the best it's ever been.
Making flight sims is hard. The end.
If there's one thing
I
I've
love
learned,
it, but it's hard.
If there's one thing I've learned, it's that. Airbus A330, really feature rich.
Yes.
What's the one thing you're really excited to get into the hands of our community?
I think that I'm definitely excited for everyone to experience, uh, a completely different way of flying an airplane. It's, completely different response, you know, how the flight controls interact, or, how the user controls rather interact with the airplane. You put the put the 330 or any Airbus into a bank, call it 15 degrees. You let go of the stick, walk away, go to the galley, go to the bathroom, whatever you have to do, come back into your cockpit seat, buckle in, drink coffee, and you're still going to be turning that 15 degrees because the plane has held it there for you. So it's just kind of a completely different experience. You're directing, but the plane's doing all the flying for you.
And I can't wait for all of those people to experience that on our, online networks. Going out for a cup of coffee in the aircraft, still being in that climbing out
Yep,
turn.
yep. Don't do that. Listen, you have to talk to ATC. Don't do that. For you
And they'll all
casual
say,
flyers who don't connect online to do your flying, that's fine. But if you're on ATC, don't leave them alone to go get coffee.
they'll all come back and they say, "Oh well, Alex from X-Plane told me."
I'm gonna get letters. I'm gonna get emails.
And so moving away from the A330, what's the one thing in X-Plane 12 that probably isn't the A330 because it's almost biased if you say that.
Oh,
What's
it
the other
definitely would be.
what's the other feature that you are really excited about that to get in our hands?
I am so excited for. I love what the sim looks like in weather right now. When you're sitting on the ground and you have that fog just sitting there and the pavement's wet, and if it's raining, there's little ripples that come, out of the puddles, and all the rain effects and everything. It's a, an incredibly immersive experience, and hopefully, people have the opportunity to try that out in VR at some point. I can't wait to try X-Plane 12 in VR. I'm on a Mac. I have no recourse. I can't do anything about it. I am stuck with this flat screen but I always look forward to that.
I'm also an occasional VR pilot. I can't do it for too long. It does make me feel a little nauseous. But the first time I experienced VR was with X-Plane, and I just kept giggling to myself about how strange it was to then fly almost a
I
3D
know.
aircraft. Incredible.
My first experience was in the 737, and I'm like, it's like I know I made this, but this is weird. Like, I'm sitting in it. It's so strange. And really, really super fun. And I did my best helicopter flight in VR because the controls were sensitive enough.
Certainly makes it a lot easier for
Oh
visual
yeah,
reference
you have
points.
the collective on the little pointer, and you pull it up the right amount, and you're like, oh, okay, this is more intuitive. I can do that, but with a joystick and a throttle and all that. Oh, I'm terrible.
I'm glad it's not just me.
It's not just you. It's not just you.
Perfect. Alex, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that you are
Yes.
obviously a very busy person building X-Plane 12 for us.
And I moved across the country, a couple weeks ago, or started this journey a month ago, and it's just been like, oh my gosh, we couldn't have picked a worse time for our house to be finished.
Well, I'm glad you're all settled in now, and best of luck
Yes,
with
yes.
the further development of X-Plane 12.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for watching, and be sure to catch the next episode of this X-Plane 12, deep dive.